What dirty little secret do you know about someone, but they don't know you know? A colleague of mine is an attractive young woman in her mid-20s and wants everyone to think that she's just a strong independent career woman. But I know she plays Magic: The Gathering online during her lunch breaks. I ducking know your secret. My friend's mother is a stuck-up, judgmental, holier than thou, preachy itch, and she has no idea that if she ever takes it too far with me I will nuke her and tell her family, community, and church about the bastard son she had as a teen that she refused to acknowledge when he found her. Oh shit. This is juicy as duck. I usually don't want bad things happening to people, but based on the way you describe her, she has it coming. An individual I know is very anti-porn. Speaks out against it on Facebook. Stops talking to people if she finds out they watch it. The whole works. Doesn't stop her from watching it with her back conveniently turned to the wall. She's also not as discreet as she thinks. My brother started the fire in our backyard that destroyed half the property and my dad's whole shed full of tools. The fire was centered around the very spot my brother had been sneaking out back at night to smoke. And he would always put the cigs out on the dry pile of logs stacked right next to him. I saw him out there every night cause my window pointed to the backyard. And I was planning to use the information for leverage to get him to take me to go messed up on Halo 2 launch night. But after the fire I kept my mouth shut. I could tell he felt guilty enough about it since he spent the whole week after helping my dad clean up the damage and repair what they could. I still got Halo 2 at midnight. So it had a happy ending. Had a friend middle school who legitimately had a crush on SpongeBob SquarePants. She let me use her computer a couple of times and I snooped through her sheet and found her stash of self-insert SpongeBob fanfiction. Found a couple of NSFW drawings as well. I couldn't really judge. I've had my fair share of animated crushes. But it was still a bizarre experience. My dad took my mom to an intimate French restaurant one year about an hour from home on a Tuesday night since it was their anniversary. In walks a married co-worker with the co-workers. Not my dad's secretary. The guy didn't see my dad but my dad was pissed. My dad would use this as a lesson to us kids. He'd tell us that you never know who sees you doing something wrong, so be honest, ethical and decent. When I was in first grade, my friend's brother in 4th grade wanted us to tie him up and embarrass him. We thought it was funny and played along. It was nothing sexual for us. But I remember his boner and wondering how it just stood up like that. But other than that, I didn't think much of that incident. Sometime during HS, I remembered all of a sudden and had a holy shit moment. Now we're older and we're friends. He probably thinks that I completely forgot about that incident, or maybe he forgot himself because there's no way he could act so naturally towards me otherwise. If I tell him now, he would just die of embarrassment. My aunt had a baby boy when she was a teen. To this day, my grandparents are not aware of their first grandson's existence and still believe I am their first grandchild. The only other person she told was her sister, my mom. I only know because my mom told me. I know one of my co-workers once had a kid who died in a fire. She was really depressed and had said she'd had to repair fire damage on her house. Quick internet search revealed the tragedy. I'll never tell anyone. Don't think anyone else knows. A colleague of mine is a convicted rapist. It is an office setting, so there are lots of women around who might feel uncomfortable around him. HR knew about the rap either in his employment application or in the background check, but decided not to tell the hiring manager and blessed the hiring. A couple of folks did a search online later only to discover there was a shit ton of coverage in the local news about the events that led to drugging and raping a young woman. My older sister is my mother. A second cousin is my father. She gave me to her parents, who legitimately adopted me and raised me. BTW. They are awesome parents. But no one felt the need to tell me who my biological parents are. I need to edit. A second cousin of hers, not a second cousin of mine, is my father. My 16-year goody two-shoes sister got caught having sex in the car twice. At midnight I got a call from a cop asking if I was her mother. Sensing something was up, I said yes. He loudly told me, "We found your daughter having sex with a boy in a car." Shocked, irritated, but laughing at her misfortune, I drove 20 minutes to pick her ass up. I pulled up to the parking lot of an apartment complex and saw 3 police cars. Lights still on. Not a lot goes on in our neighborhood on a Saturday night. Her boyfriend sat on the curb talking to one of 3 cops, but still waved when he saw me pull up. Cute. A very serious cop with eyebrow way too plucked brought my crying sister to the car. It was clear I wasn't our mom, since I'm just a few years older. But my cunning small talk convinced him to let me take her home instead of calling our mom again. On the way back she was all too grateful for protecting her from my mother's unforgiving wrath. She doesn't know 6 months later and confessed that they'd been caught elsewhere last weekend. In conclusion, I'm the slickest, coolest sister you could have, and she is forever my itch. Not really a dirty secret, but I walked into a person's house and heard them and their spouse getting it on in their bedroom across the house really loudly. I quietly backed out and closed the door and left. This is someone who'd asked me to do some work for them, and I've been in their house many times and they'd told me to come on in and work on it, and I thought they knew I was going to be there soon. I knocked and called out their name, but their lovemaking was louder than my announcement. I think I'll bring it up at their funeral because they're a bit older than me and their kids would get a good laugh about it. A female friend confessed to me drunk one night that her father once made out with her for a few minutes while they were on a canoe trip together when she was like 11. She says that, to the best of her recollection, that's as far as it got and it was a one-time thing. I didn't press for details. Next day she either didn't remember talking about it, or pretended not to remember, knowing I'd follow suit. It's strange because on the surface she seems to have a really good family. Parents are tight and all. I've even been to dinner with them all since the conversation. Really bucked me up for a while though. I was sure there had to be some history of systematic abuse or whatever buried beneath the surface. But damn, maybe not. This is a morbid question, and in no way a sort of apologia for child abuse. But do you think that it happens from time to time? A father gets drunk. Some hidden monster comes out for 6 minutes, in the case of him making out with my friend, and then never does anything like that again. Around 2000-2001. My roommate at the time used to take pictures of him and his girlfriend ducking and store them in his desk. This was way before everyone had phones or digital cameras. She's a very proper girl, and has always dressed conservatively, and gave off a vibe of being sort of quiet and boring. They have been married for about 12 years now with 2 kids, and is very much the supermom who's on the PTA, Kids Soccer League board of directors, teaches Sunday school, etc. The pictures were of her wearing a ball gag and him ducking her in the ass, while others of her with a huge black dildo in her mouth and a butt plug in. Lots of facials too. My friend would be shocked if he knew I saw these, and his wife would probably have a heart attack. Someone I know once went away with her boyfriend for a few months, allegedly to travel the world. I, accidentally, saw some documents lying around that makes me pretty sure that she was pregnant and dropping the baby off with an adoptive family. Not so much a dirty little secret as much as a young couple dealing with a private manner in a responsible way. Mom, I know you wanted to abort me. Dad accidentally spilled the beans. Newsflash, I don't care mom, it is really not a problem. I found my Game Boy 2 days before my mom wrapped it for Christmas in 1989. On Christmas I played it cool. Back in the 90s, a drug dealing friend of mine offered to buy my friend and I drinks all night if we accompanied him to local roadhouse where he was supposed to meet a guy who was supposed to deliver him some speed. The guy never showed up, and my friend was furious. The absentee drug delivery guy was found stabbed to death in a ditch outside town a couple of days later. Pretty sure my friend killed him. A botany professor at my university managed to impregnate his wife and a colleague within 1 week. He is now known to some as the pollinator. He is still married and still works with the mother of his other child. My dad cheated on his ex-wife with my mom. My older brother, from first wife, has no idea that my dad cheated on her, assumed they were already divorced. I actually don't know if my mom knows either. Dad's been married to my mom for like 25 years now. So no point in stirring up trouble now. My dad has had multiple affairs over the past 10 years. And I'm the only one in our family who knows. He does a lot of international business for work. And a few years ago I became suspicious of how he spends his time. So I got access to his email and phone records and found out about 3 long-term mistresses spanning a few years time period. All outside the US. I wanted to tell my mom. But I knew it would absolutely crush her. And despite his infidelity, he's always been a good provider father for us. And this information would have completely torn the family apart and left my mom in ruins. I never confronted him about it. And from what I can gather he had a change of heart and completely stopped about 2 years ago. But to this day I still sometimes wonder whether or not I did the right thing by not saying anything. While on a family trip to Thailand, my mom spent a few days in the hospital. My dad told us that she was sick. But I know she really just got a bob job. I once overheard my divorced mother tell a friend of hers how my father once gave her a venereal disease when they were still married. Years later I was visiting with my father and I relayed this info to him. He exclaimed, "How could I have ever given it to her? I never had it." I was at a party with one of my employees and her husband. She begins giving her husband's best friend shit about his part in a 3-way between another mutual friend and a well-known barfly. I notice, out of the corner of my eye, her husband make himself small and quickly step away to find himself a new conversation. Turns out the 3-way was actually his best friend, the barfly, and him. Also turns out pretty much the entire town, small town, knew. With the exception of my employee, his wife, who continually beat that dead horse to razz her husband's friends. I posted this story in a couple other threads. But it seems appropriate here as well. The president of our company held a Christmas party at his house. My manager was there and brought his wife. As the night was winding down, his wife was absolutely plastered. She wasn't the happy-go-lucky cheerful kind of drunk. Nor a particularly angry or at all emotional kind. She was the kind of drunk that sat by themselves and braced a hand on any nearby object to maintain balance while slow blinking with a gently wobbling head. She motioned her husband over a couple times and whispered something in his ear. And he looked frustrated as he mouthed words I couldn't hear and went back to mingling. My brother and dad both went to rehab for alcoholism. So I was fairly confident from her mannerisms and his reaction that she had a legitimate alcohol problem. Fast forward a month or so and my manager asks me for the recipe of something I brought to a company potluck a while back. I email it to him and get a strange email back with the text, "I'll meet you there at sometime I don't remember," with an address. I looked up the address and found it belonged to a nearby rehab clinic. I responded to the email with, "Think you meant to send this email to someone else," and he responded with wrong address. 2. Obviously he was covering his tracks in case I looked it up. But I never said anything to him or any of my coworkers about it. My manager's a cool guy and having a family member with alcohol problems sucks. So I figured it would be best to keep the exchange between us and feign ignorance. This kid I went to high school with has a massive sex addiction. Like over the edge addict. During his junior year when he was 17, he rented a motel, the most rundown one in our valley, and had a prostitute meet him there. His mom read his texts about the ordeal and walked in on her 17-year-old son ducking a prostitute in the cheapest truck stop motel. He doesn't know I know. And I found out from a close friend of his. Neither of my parents know that I know why their marriage finally fell apart. They never told me why they got a divorce. My mom would just say we didn't love each other or we didn't get along anymore, and then my mom's ex-BFF told me that they finally split up because my dad gave my mom an ultimatum. Either you get an abortion or we get a divorce. So I have a great mom and a great little brother and very little contact with my shitty dad. I'm pro-choice. And my mom's choice was to keep him. and I respect that. My husband pretends not to like bacon so he can give it to me because he knows I like it more. He's sweet. My ex-husband was fired from a job because he made a massive mistake. He fixed someone's truck, but put it back together wrong. So when that guy was driving down the interstate, his whole tire fell off, and he almost crashed. I don't know if he even knows. I think they told him he was too slow or something. I found out from a friend who worked at the shop, who had got my ex-husband his job. I work for a pretty homophobic conservative company. Little does the owner know that a few other co-workers and I have listened to him ramble on about how he is secretly gay while he is drummed multiple times. He doesn't remember. He's married with a son and they have no clue about how he really feels. I found a good friend of my husband's on Reddit accidentally and snooped their profile. Turns out his long-term girlfriend, whom he moved countries for and was planning to propose to, ghosted him because she was sick of his anxiety and depression. The posts were really awfully sad and I wish I did not have this knowledge. He tries to put up a happy face in person and social media, but he's hurting inside. Not exactly dirty, but my friend's reputation at school would probably be ruined if this came out. One of my closest friends is completely fake. He has lied about fluently speaking a different language and lied about being born in a fascinating foreign country. I'm pretty sure 90% of the stories he tells me about himself are completely fake and are only made to make himself look cooler. He has lied for years to try to make himself unique and get more attention from girls and people in general. There was this one time I also caught him blatantly picking his nose in the middle of class and trying to hide it. That too. I remember that I was at my friend's house and I wake up to a sound like FWMP FWMP FWMP. I looked down to see that he was face down, humping the ground in his sleep. I was afraid to get up out of the fear that I would wake him, so I waited for an hour and a half with the sound of FWMP FWMP FWMP. Sweet Jesus. As for the secret he doesn't know about me is that one time we were sleeping in a bunk bed. I was masturbating. No one knows. Except for now. Through a conversation with my roommate. It turns out he talked a friend of mine out of killing herself about a month ago. He found her sobbing on the sidewalk and kept her from running into traffic till his buddy found her friend came to come get her. He doesn't know my friend. And she doesn't know I know. My mom was married before my dad. Twice. When she decided to keep that from her kids for 34 years she didn't realize Google would be a thing one day. I wouldn't consider it a dirty secret, but she is too embarrassed to tell me. She doesn't need to be. My cousin was in a les relationship for a brief amount of time. She's back to dating guys now. My old boss was an absolute itch. I found a new job and quit my old one, thinking I'd never have to talk to her again. Tax time rolls around and I had to get a certificate from her. She wouldn't reply to my messages or pick up my phone calls. I couldn't go into my old work and see her because it had shut down. I needed the certificate to lodge my tax return. I decided to lodge a complaint with the tax office because it's illegal to not issue staff with group certificates. And I won't lie, I was still a bit salty from how she treated me before I quit, so any chance to get her in trouble, I'll take. When I went to Google her name to find out her business number, multiple news articles came up. Turns out a few years prior, she scammed the government of 70 grand. She claimed she was a single parent of 3 kids for over 5 years when really she was living with her partner, working for his successful company. I continued to scroll Google and found many reviews of the cafe I used to work at, all stating not to buy from this cafe because the owner scammed the community. The whole time I worked for her, I never knew. Pretty funny considering she would comment on welfare bludgers quite regularly at work. I am adopted. That part isn't the secret. For the longest time I suspected that my biological mother was a prostitute. I recently found out from my biological sister that this was absolutely true. My dad tried to cheat on his wife by rekindling an old flame via Facebook. I kiboshed it by telling the woman what I knew and that I'd tell her husband if she didn't cut contact with my dad. She blocked him immediately. He was all bummed for the next week. Moral? Don't leave your Facebook logged in. Edit. I have no idea how many times he has cheated on his wife. I only know what I've caught. That's why the moral isn't don't cheat on your spouse. She's not a good person either, but cheaters piss me off, so when I had the chance to stop it, I did. My boss's father murdered his first wife. The second wife, my boss's mother, and he, the boss, have no idea. The father died about 20 years ago and took the secret with him. He had been married for about a year to a woman, then got drunk and bashed her to death with a hammer. Then he called the cops and told them she fell and hit her head on a pipe. They found his bloody clothes and a hammer in the closet. He did 15 years of his sentence, then got out on good behavior. He moved to another state, mine, remarried and started over with a new family. They have no idea about his past. I know my grandma is a cheater. She cheated on my grandpa, her second deceased husband and her current one. My aunts who are younger than me have no idea, and they think my grandma met their dad after her 2 marriages when she was dating him the entire time. There was a family who stopped talking to her a few years back. It was her daughter's previous babysitter, because she was sleeping with the woman's son. I've almost let it slip a few times around them, but I keep myself from telling them that. There's no reason for them to know. This girl had an abortion. Comes from a super religious family and parents would disown her if they found out. Only reason why I found out cause we were on a trip with a group and she got too wasted and was kicked out of the club. Being the only sober one there, I walked her back to the hotel room where she told me everything before passing out drunk. I needed to Google something and my older brother gave me his phone to use. When I started typing, it suggested something along the lines of girl ducking dog porn. I think he was watching me, but he might not realize that I saw it because I pretended I didn't. A guy who was my best friend had an affair with my coworker. They are both male and we were living in one of those small towns where they couldn't possibly have been in the open about their orientation, which was really sad. I happened to see the other guy leave my friend's place through a side door, looking around furtively, and when I went to my friend's place, all the blinds were closed and he looked really guilty. I put 2 and 2 together pretty quickly but left it alone. I figured if he wanted me to know he would tell me, but I always felt so bad for both of them to hide who they were. Eventually they each moved away and I lost touch, but I always hoped that they both found happiness in a more tolerant environment.